Good morning, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with this week's weather, where we're taking a look at the weather across the United States for this upcoming week. We got a lot of things to jump into, so let's go and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the United States today, most of the weather is actually quite quiet, except for the portions of southern Texas and out across portions of the Midwest today, where severe weather is possible in both locations. Elsewise, we're actually noticing pretty mild temperatures across most of the entire U.S., with the exception of portions of kind of the northwestern part where we've got temperatures in the 50s and even some lower 30s to start this morning. But overall, quite warm across most of the U.S. today, and that's going to be the story throughout the next several weeks. Speaking of severe weather, we do have a slight risk for severe storms. This generally runs across portions of the Central Plains today and over into the Midwest sector, as we so call it. This generally running from about Sioux Falls all the way down through Cedar Rapids, Iowa, Quincy, Illinois, through just about near Peoria, Illinois, and Springfield, with a large marginal risk all the way down to near Evansville, Indiana, and into the Missouri Boot Hill region. We have another marginal risk across portions of Virginia Beach and the North Carolina and Southern Virginia area, and another smaller marginal risk from portions of Oklahoma, southwestern Arkansas, western Louisiana, back into portions of Texas, like places like Dallas and Houston today. The overall tornado threat, again, 5% across this northern mode from Cedar Rapids and near Sioux Falls down through near Peoria, Illinois. In a large 2% region in that marginal risk down here across our southern mode today. Damaging winds, large hail, again 15% in that slight risk area for both the wind and hail threats as we progress throughout today. Day 2, we have a marginal risk for severe storms, generally from about near Peoria, Illinois, down to the northeastern tip of in the northeastern tip there of Mississippi, across portions of northern Alabama and through portions of Tennessee and Kentucky. And then on day 3, we have a marginal risk for severe storms out across the southeast U.S., generally running from about Atlanta, Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, just to the west of Charleston, South Carolina, to near Jacksonville, Florida, for the next upcoming days. So it is certainly going to be a busy one out there. Looking at the GFS precipitable water forecast, this goes all the way out till next Sunday. We notice that we have a fairly significant amount of time with a lot of moisture out across most of the U.S. However, notice what's occurring out across the northern and northeastern part of the U.S. We actually get a reinforcing shot of cooler and much drier air to punch in all the way from about Pennsylvania and New York, New Jersey, all the way up through Maine and into Canada. We get a reinforcing shot of much cooler air, and then we notice what happens. We kind of get the secondary surge of cooler, drier air to surge in, and this basically just shuts off most of the mid-Atlantic and Northeast from dealing with any significant precip by the time we get into the latter half of next week, which is certainly not really good news, because obviously this area definitely could use some of the rain out there. But generally speaking, a few more chances for severe storms out across the Central Plains and out across the southeast U.S. over the next several days. Certainly some heavier rain possible. Another reinforcing shot here of much cooler, drier air that sets up towards the end of the forecast period. Lots of return flow already, though, ongoing by the end of this forecast period out across the Central High Plains, meaning that there should at least be somewhat sufficient moisture for these thunderstorms and potential severe weather as we head into the latter half of the forecast period. But overall, it's going to be pretty moist out across the southeast and central plains throughout about the next week. But multiple reinforcing cool fronts will likely limit any severe threat east of the Mississippi River, and certainly will provide for much cooler and drier air to set in across this area. So more of a spring type feeling more than anything else. If we actually take a look here at the GFS 2-meter temperature forecast all the way out till next Sunday, we can actually see these cold fronts sort of making their way into the northern part of the U.S., where temperatures actually get pretty cool, especially out across portions of Maine even. You've got temperatures in the low 40s. Of course, this would be a morning temperature, but even in the upper 30s in the Chicago area, UP of Michigan up there about 39. Of course, it's going to be nice and warm down to the south. Orlando 73. But generally speaking, we notice that there's going to be that reinforcing shot of cooler and drier air, even some temperatures all the way down into the 30s out across this area as we progress throughout the remainder of next week, at least for the overnight and morning temperatures. Of course, these temperatures will warm up and moderate during the day, and we do have to take this with a grain of salt. The GFS has been known to have a cool bias, especially in the medium to long range, but this is definitely lining up with the overall pattern that we could even see temperatures back down into the upper or in lower 50s, even across portions of northern Alabama to start the day later next Sunday. So we have a lot to watch here, but this certainly would mean that the greatest severe weather potential throughout about the next week is going to remain out across the central plains and probably not spread east of the Mississippi. So if we actually look here at the day 1 through 5 quantitative precipitation forecast, just basically a measure of how much rain is expected to fall within the next 5 days, we notice generally where the target area is actually going to be, generally out here across portions of southern Texas into northern Mexico through the next 5 days. Very little rain to the east of the Mississippi River, and only that precipitation that we're seeing today out across the high plains and Midwestern U.S. But generally elsewhere, we notice that really the precipitation forecast doesn't really exceed 1 inch, especially anywhere over to the east of the Mississippi River. So that's mainly going to be confined to far southern Texas and northern Mexico, where we could see over 4 inches of rain over the next 5 days. So the new CPC outlook throughout the next 6 to 10 days, generally expecting much above average temperatures out across the Florida Peninsula, with basically below average temperatures expected all the way from Texas through portions of Canada, with then warmer than normal temperatures expected out there across the western U.S., Boise, Idaho, Nevada, Seattle, all the way through Los Angeles, San Jose. Temperatures expected to be much above average in the 6 to 10 day forecast, and in the 8 to 14 day forecast, again, temperatures remain above normal out across portions of the Florida Peninsula and out across portions of the Canadian Maritimes over to really about Long Island area back through Maine. Cooler than average temperatures expected Texas all the way back up to portions of Canada, and then also above average temperatures out here across the western U.S. as we continue with predominant ridging out across this area and general troughiness out across the central part of the U.S., bringing multiple rainstorms and the potential for severe weather to this area. Looking at the precipitation forecast throughout the 6 to 10 day period, again, generally out across the northern part of the U.S., we're dealing with below average precipitation with much above average precipitation chances for portions of the desert Southwest and the Four Corners region, all the way throughout the Florida Peninsula and all the way into portions of Maine. And in the 8 to 10 day forecast, we expect to see again above average precipitation chances from generally again the southeast U.S. all the way throughout the desert Southwest and Four Corners region. And just looking at an overall monthly forecast, we expect much above average precipitation forecast or potential out across portions of California and the western U.S. Predominantly, generally, we're looking at less precipitation chances out across the northern part of the U.S. and Midwest, with above average precipitation chances for the southern plains and down into the southeast U.S. and the Florida Peninsula, meaning that we are firmly entrenched within a El Nino-like pattern, although we are officially not in an El Nino yet, but we are certainly moving in that direction and the atmosphere is responding as such. This is a typical wintertime pattern for the U.S. Looking at the overall dew point forecast off of the GFS, we continue to see that surge of dry air making its way into the northern part of the U.S. and even ostensibly to a point that dips all the way down here to portions of the Midwestern U.S. throughout the latter part of the forecast period. But overall, return flow sets up pretty nice across portions of Texas. And so that definitely suggests that there will be severe weather potential out across the plain states for the next several days, continuing into next week. However, it seems like at the latter part of the forecast period, we are not having a significant return flow pattern, which means that any severe threat will probably be confined to Texas, which is certainly some good news for any relaxation out across portions of the central high plains, because you've definitely had a lot of severe weather over there throughout the last several days, so that is certainly some good news. So with that being said, I do hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Mike O'Malley. God bless, take care, and I'll talk to you guys again some more over the next several days.